Hey folks, welcome back to Indaba Africa. This is Chris. Done and dusted. It's over. They're toast. Who am I talking about? Well, the latest air carrier to collapse in the midst of the era of COVID is Air Namibia, which ceased all operations on February 11th of 2021. But in effect, most of its 9 aircraft have been grounded for nearly a year. So it's really just a fait accompli that this date was going to occur. So on the 11th of February 2021, Air Namibia announced that it would cease all operations. In fact, the telephones no longer work. People trying to call Air Namibia on the 11th of February found out they couldn't get through. The only way to reach the airline at this stage is via email address, which they sent out on Twitter and a few other locations. Well, the nearly 75-year-old commercial air carrier was owned by the state, entirely owned by the government of Namibia for a long time now, and it has ceased all operations. At this point, the government in Windhoek is announcing that it will liquidate the airline. While this is hardly the first air carrier to succumb during the era of COVID, it's the first in 2021. In 2020, 34 commercial air carriers folded up their tent and went home and no longer exist. Air Namibia has the distinction of becoming the first commercial air carrier to fold up its tent in 2021. And that's unfortunate for travelers in Namibia who are now left without a national carrier to get from place to place. Now, it's hardly surprising that these airlines are folding their tents given the responses of incompetent and corrupt national governments around the planet, banning travel and placing burdens on air carriers that are untenable and unrealistic. Many of these airlines that collapsed in 2020 and Air Namibia collapsed not simply because of COVID. Many of them were poorly managed. They had bad business models, poor strategic vision, or operated in markets that weren't profitable. However, arguably we can make the case that COVID-19 is the proximate cause or the final nail in the coffin of many of these now 35 air carriers, commercial air carriers. Air Namibia goes out of business with 600 employees left on the hook. Now, according to their release, their statement, those 600 employees will be given a severance package equal to 12 months of pay. That's pretty generous given the fact the airline has no money. So I wonder where that's going to come from. As I mentioned, the telephone lines are already dead, folks. You can't even call Air Namibia. If you want to get a refund, you've already booked a ticket, you're going to have to send an email to one of 2 email addresses they put available on social media in order to get your money back. And good luck with that. You better move fast before all the money is gone. Now, Air Namibia was a small carrier. It was an international carrier. It did travel throughout the region, and it had one major overseas destination outside Africa. That was Frankfurt. For years, of course, because of the special relationship between Germany and Namibia, that flight flew between Windhoek and Frankfurt. Even had 747s at one point, which they leased from South African Airways. Of the 9 aircraft that Air Namibia had as it went out of business, 3 of them were A319s, 2 of them were A330s, and the remaining 4 aircraft were Embraer ERJ 135 regional aircraft. Now, the reality, as I said, is most of this fleet has been grounded already for a year. It's been on the ground for a year. Air Namibia served 18 destinations, as I mentioned, that included Frankfurt, but also domestically, and also flew flights throughout the region, including to OR Tambo in South Africa. Now, here's one thing that's still hanging out there, folks, the one big mozzarella ball for Air Namibia. In late January, on the 29th of January, there was an agreement reached for Air Namibia to pay debt that it owed to Challenge Air, another bankrupt air carrier based in Belgium. And this all stems from a 1998 lease on a Boeing 767-300 model aircraft, which was leased to Air Namibia. And they owed something on the order of like $18 million to Challenge Air. Well, lawyers, attorneys for Challenge Air, including in Namibia, Sisa Napanja, said that they expect that Air Namibia meets its obligations. There was a settlement reached in late January of 2021 saying that Air Namibia would in fact pay $11.9 million to Challenge Air, or at least to the entity that was Challenge Air. The first installment of that debt is due on the 18th of February, $6 million. Half the money is set to be paid on the 18th of February. So once again, if you have a ticket, I recommend you contact them today or tomorrow. Get your money back if you've paid for a ticket to Air Namibia before it's gone, because they owe Challenge Air $6 million on the 18th of February. And I'm not sure how they're going to pay for that, where that money is going to come from, but it seems unlikely to be taking place. Wow. Now, Air Namibia began as a private entity back in November of 1946, and hence it's over 74 years old in its 75th year of operations through a different amalgamation of one airline and another, eventually being called Air Namibia in the independence era. And this state-owned company is now bankrupt and being liquidated. There isn't much in the way of assets to sell off, so the state is not going to recoup much money, given it's given a few bailouts to Air Namibia over the years. This is perhaps a good example for South African Airways. The egotistical view of the African National Congress that they must have a national carrier really needs to be attenuated, needs to be moderated, needs to be toned down. And the African National Congress should accept reality that South African Airways was a corrupt, incompetent, inefficient national carrier which blew its golden chance. When apartheid ended in 1994, the airline best poised to spread its wings across Africa and establish networks throughout the continent, make a profit and expand and grow was South African Airways. A parastatal under the National Party, it had been profitable despite apartheid, despite being forced to fly around Africa. It can now fly throughout Africa, saving millions of dollars in unnecessary fuel costs and picking up passengers transporting throughout the continent. The goodwill of the Rainbow Nation of 1994, Mandela ascending to presidency, and the reconciliation that was at least on the surface made South Africa a warm story that everyone wanted to be involved with. It was a time in which all restrictions were lifted against South African Airways across Africa. It should have been what Ethiopian is today. Ethiopian is a parastatal. While I don't believe in parastatals, it is a parastatal that is run as a private entity. The government does not interfere in the operations whatsoever. And we see what happens when competent people run airlines. Ethiopian has expanded across Africa. It's profitable. It flies the Dreamliner, the 787, and it flies routes to the United States, to Europe, around the world. It's done quite well. Other carriers have moved into Africa, including Kenya Airways has spread its way around Africa, not as profitable, but doing reasonably well. In addition to that, we see Turkish Airlines spreading its wings across Africa. And what's happened in South Africa has gone from an airline with nearly 50 aircraft to an airline with 9 aircraft, dated, ancient, and desperately in need of capitalization and house cleaning. Here's a little advice to the African National Congress. Get over your ego. Liquidate South African Airways. You don't need a national carrier. Follow the example, intentional or otherwise, of Namibia and move on. Well, folks, if you're not a subscriber to Chris White Africa, why not become one? Smash the subscription button right down there. And be sure to toggle the bell icon to get notified on your YouTube app when videos are made and updated. And then finally, why not give us a like? Smash that like button. And if you like to, you can leave a comment behind. Abusive comments will be deleted, or they'll be the subject of humor on a future video. Thanks a lot, folks. Appreciate your time, your custom, and your patience. Once again, rest in peace, Air Namibia, liquidated, ceased operations, now being liquidated after nearly 75 years of operation in Southwest Africa and Namibia.